Glosters are one of the most popular exhibition canaries in the world, but for beginners they can also feel confusing, from birdroom setup to breeding and eventually stepping onto the show bench. Today we're in the birdroom of Dave Rands, an international Gloster Canary judge with over 40 years of experience. We're also joined by Mitch Cowan, a prolific exhibitor who's progressed from the novice tier to the champion tier of exhibition Gloster Canaries. And Tim Kemp, who represents the beginner's journey, asking the questions most new starters are thinking but don't always say. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to start with Gloster Canaries properly, from starting up with your first birdroom, choosing the right birds, breeding successfully, and knowing when you're ready to show. This is Starting with Gloster Canaries, from beginner to the show bench. Okay, so Dave, would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name's Dave Rands. For them that don't know me, I've been keeping the Glosters now for close on 40 years. They've got me all around the world judging them and things like that. I enjoy the showing, the exhibition. I enjoy everything to do with the Glosters. It's really part of my life, and that's, you know, it's taken over from early 20s. So
fantastic. Well, it's a wonderful hobby, and it's, like you say, a massive pastime that you've enjoyed and become a real expert in.
Yes, and it's created me a job as well. I make the cages, and you know, it's gone from there. It's growing all the time.
Fantastic. And then Tim, you're a new starter, so do you want to just quickly introduce us about Glosters and what attracted you to the breed?
Yeah, well, I used to keep them about 30 years ago, and as I was growing up, other things got in the way, so now I've got a bit more time on my hands. I decided that I wanted to get back into them, and basically I reached out to a local guy who in my area, because I'm from Cumbria, and asked who do I need to see and to circle with in order for us to build up my birdroom, my accessories, and most importantly the birds. And these are the guys who I've surrounded myself with, and luckily where I live there's some top guys up there as well, so yeah.
Perfect. No, amazing. So starting off with then, somebody's coming into the world of Gloster Canaries. Maybe they're a pet bird owner, they've just had a canary in their back room, or maybe they've been with a different canary. Where do you start with Glosters? What do you need from a setup?
Well, you can be as small as you want or as large as you want. Ideally, you know, if you just started out with them, maybe a 6x4 shed or 8x8 shed or something like that, and a proper sort of breeding cages as opposed to pet shop cages. You know, you want to be able to control your breeding, or, you know, have dividers in between double cages and stuff like that. And the light is one of the main things, is having plenty of lighting. You don't necessarily need heating or artificial light, but as long as you've got the windows and the light coming through, the natural light coming through, that's, you know, that's a good start.
Perfect. And from a point of view of air quality, we know this is really important for the birds and ourselves in our birdrooms. What do you do for ventilation?
Well, I have plenty of open windows. I have a fan that comes on every so often, and that's basically it. As long as you keep the dust, you know, the dust down and clean out regular and stuff like that, it's, you know, everything should work all right.
Fantastic. And Tim, I know you've got, as a new starter, you've got a couple of questions that are probably something quite common amongst the fancy of people coming in. They want to ask these questions that maybe they've been too nervous to ask. So from your point of view, what are absolute sort of things you have to know?
Well, for me, I needed to know what type of cages I actually needed, because back in the day I was just using wood, and now that I've met Dave and got the cages off Dave, and they're all out of plastic, and they're so much easier to clean, which again is very important for me, is to make sure that the birds are housed in a nice clean environment. And if the birds are kept like that, they're all nice and happy, and it's, you know, if they're happy, they're a fit bird.
Of course, no, absolutely. The cleanliness is so important. Then, in terms of other new starter questions you might come into, just on a setup basis? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, just box basic things like feed. What type of feed do they use? You know, what different brands of feed, water, do they use vitamins, all sorts of things like that.
So, on the topic of seed then, what's your go-to? How do you look at the bird's diet from week to week? Is it seed? Do you add vegetables? Do you add egg food? How often?
Yeah, I mean, people have all different ways of doing it. My way is I'll start conditioning them sort of early January, start giving them a little bit of egg food, conditioning seed maybe once, twice a week.
Yep.
The egg food I'll mince up a little bit of green food into it and just bring them on slowly. My aim is to sort of start breeding sort of end of March, mid-April. That's when I would aim to start breeding, and hopefully the weather's right by then and the birds are in the right condition by then. So that's you slowly build up to that. Normally you have a general good quality mixed canary seed, and that's where we'll go from there.
Fantastic. And then egg food, how often are you offering egg food from the conditioning into when rearing chicks, and do you mix anything in the egg food? Yeah,
basically they'll get, I use what they call the dried vegetable. You bring it back to life, add in a little bit of water to it, you mix that in with your egg food. I'll also put a little bit of garlic powder in with it in case nowadays we don't get any mite, but I still do it automatically so we don't get any mite. I'll mix, a lot of people don't do this, but I mix seaweed with the egg food. That's good for the birds. It's got iron in it, and I think it also does a lot for the colour of the birds as well. So.
And then any other? Do you ever give fresh veg? Do you ever bother with anything like that,
yes.
Or always the dry?
No, not always the dry. I'll get the fresh vegetables as well and mix them in. If you know, I use them both together. It's what I don't like is getting the broccoli and putting it on bottom of the cage because it all gets messed up and they're eating muck. So. I prefer it all in the egg food, and I usually change the egg food. Once I start breeding, I usually change the egg food maybe 3-4 times a day if I'm local and stuff like that.
Of course. And then as you alluded to there about putting the vegetables on the floor, so what do you use on the bottom of your cages? What's your preference?
I use what they call wood chip. It's like sawdust, but it's one that I get in Holland. And it's graded and it's a certain size. It's not that heavy, not that light that it floats all over the place when the birds fly about. So that's what I prefer on the bottom.
Tim, did you find that a dilemma from? Would you go sandpaper? Would you go newspaper? Would you go wood chip? Would you go sawdust? Do you ever have any of those issues when starting out?
No, because I just asked these guys what they're using.
Yeah.
No, that's a great response. Yeah, learn from the best, of course.
Learn from the best, yeah.
And then on your cages, looking at some of the cage furniture and things you're going to add to the cage. So we've mentioned about the sawdust.
Yeah.
Perches, plastic or wooden perches?
I prefer wooden perches because that absorbs, if they get any muck off on their feet, the wood absorbs it a little bit, whereas the plastic doesn't. It tends to be a little bit clarty, so my preference is wood. Also is you can have the varying shape in the wood, you see, which is good for the birds. The claws will grow to the shape of the perches all the time, whereas if you have a varying shape, they don't grow as long.
Brilliant, and I think that's something that we should all absolutely consider. And then in terms of your cage furniture, something that stands out to me is you don't really have any of these, let's say, top hat drinkers, but actually a lot of the cups. What's your reasoning for that as a drinker?
Well, for me, every time you give them fresh water, they'll get a bath, they'll wash their faces, they'll get a bath out of the top hat drinker all the time, whereas a tube drinker, not necessarily, they can't do that. And, you know, plus it gets them used to sticking their head through the hole for when they're in a show cage, you see. So
of course,
you know, it's part training at the same time.
And is that the same theory behind having your external feeders rather than sort of pots inside?
Yes, yeah. That's the way I prefer it. You can see what's going on. I don't like a lot of stuff you don't need stuck on the cages, you see.
Yeah.
So
and from a management perspective, accessing your seed from the outside is far easier than going in the cages and spooking the birds.
And it's routine. Everything's done, you know, really made simple. That's my idea of, you want everything as simple as possible.
Of course.
Just one question that popped into me there, Dave. Cuttlefish, do you use that, or is it important to use?
Yes, it is, but not like a lot of people do it, where they have a big piece clipped to the front of the cage, because when it comes to breeding season, my birds will get a little bit cut off, like size of my thumbnail, thrown in the bottom, and you'll see when they're taking the cuttlefish, you'll see they'll just nibble away at that one piece. There's no point in having them big pieces on the front to collect dust and to go mucky, and just, you know, I would put cuttlefish in, and I'm a big believer in eggshells, chicken eggshells ground up, baked so it kills any salmonella in the eggshell, and crushed as fine as possible, and every time you clean out, throw some of that in at the bottom for them to pick about on.
What's the cuttlefish for then?
It's a form of calcium.
Yeah.
And you'll see the birds don't always take it. This is another thing. I prefer the natural eggshells are the best calcium you can give your birds, and I prefer that, whereas some people will give calcium in the water, but you're forcing them to take calcium and they might not need it. The birds will take calcium when they need it. Yeah. Not when you're telling them to, basically.
Supplements and medication, they're something that a lot of people do use, a lot of people don't use. It does depend on the breed. You might find, you know, smaller breeds maybe require slightly less, larger breeds maybe require slightly more. What's your experience? What supplements do you use and what medication do you use? Mainly
I use, beginning of the season and through the breeding season, grog. I find it's a good, they've taken a little bit of the antibiotics out of it, but it's a good gut cleanser and everything. I know it's supposed to be designed for the black spot, but you do tend to still get a little bit of black spot with it. But I think overall it's a good gut cleanser for the birds, is the grog.
Yeah.
And that's the only one really I would use. I would maybe use, there's another one, Harker's 4-in-1. I would treat them maybe prior to breeding season with that. So that cleans them out well, you know, in general. But I try not to use any additives if I can help it. You know, just basically fresh water, good seed, good egg food. I use Vanadine to clean my drinkers out, which I find that's very good. A very good thing.
How often do you clean your drinkers?
At least once a week in the Vanadine. It leaves them sparkling. It leaves a film on of the Vanadine on there, so that your bacteria can't grow. And they get it changed every single day. Sometimes in the summer they'll get the water changed 3 times a day.
Brilliant. So it's in keeping that water quality there is obviously extremely important for the bird's health. And then on the supplement side, so do you never really bother with a vitamin supplement, a protein, a liquid calcium or anything like that?
No, not if the birds look right. No, I don't. No, I prefer it all as natural as possible, really.
And that's so the idea behind it is that the calcium, the vitamins, the minerals and everything, they're getting from the diet, so there's no need to offer that as an additional.
No, I don't think so, no. You know, as long as your birds are, obviously, if suddenly you didn't have any full eggs or anything, there's something wrong, but normally I can get them into condition just naturally.
Okay, so it is from a treatment point of view, it is relatively simple then in how you treat the birds in that you go everything through the diet, fresh clean water, obviously a very nice, clean environment, and the birds are absolutely fine in that case.
That's how I try and do it, and that's how I've done it sort of all the time. You get different products suddenly come on the market and you'll give them a go, but they don't seem to make that, to me, they don't make that much difference.
Okay, perfect.
You know, I mean, there's the one thing that has been a game changer now with the canaries is the exalt.
Yes.
For the mite, that's been a real game changer. That's altered everything really.
And how often are you treating the birds with exalt? Are you finding that maybe initially upon trying it you was doing it a bit more to get on top of mite, and now you barely see
No,
it?
I've done what the veterinary, you know, explained to me, and it's I do it every 8 weeks, and that's sufficient.
Perfect.
Yeah, everything, you know, I find everything's really good. That's been the last 4 or 5 years I've used it. That's been a real game changer. You don't have to worry that, although I still put the garlic in the egg food and everything. That's just natural, but you don't have to worry that much about mite now.
Perfect. No, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, breeding Gloster Canaries, then, of course, this is absolutely crucial, which is something that most people are going to want to keep them for. And for developing an exhibition strain, you've obviously got to breed your birds in relatively decent quantities. So, can you talk us through how you breed your Glosters, from cage setup, nest pans, everything like that?
Yep. You've got to be able for breeding good ones. You've got to be able to control the breeding. So we put them into what we call a double breeder. So you can have the cock at one side, the hen at the other side, like that. And then to get them, you'll start seeing your cock birds singing a little bit. You'll have the divider in between. You'll pull the divider a little bit like that. Some people would put a wire divider in between so they can see each other, but I like it the old-fashioned way, where they've got to look at each other behind the back of the slide. And sometimes to tease them, you'd put some green food right so the hen can't reach it, but the cockbird can, and gradually he should start feeding the hen round the back of the thing. And that's a sign. Once they start feeding each other, that's a sign that they're pairing up, but not necessarily breeding fitness. It's just a sign that they're compatible and they pair up with each other. You gradually, once you've been like that maybe for a fortnight, and then you'll decide, think, yes, they look fit enough, you'll pull the slide. If there's no fighting, then, and the way you can tell, because they won't fight straight away, what should happen when you pull the slide, if they're in the right condition, each bird should tighten up and really go really thin on the perch, really tighten up, and that they're in condition. They may jump straight through and tread straight away if they're really tip-top condition, but the idea is you put them together, there's no fighting. If you go out the shed and you come back in and the sawdust all scattered and you see the clear floor, that means that's a sign that they've been fighting. So you don't really want that, so you would put the slide back in until the time is right again. Another way of testing to see if your hen bird's in the right condition is put a little bit of nesting material in. If she picks it up straight away and starts with it, working it at back of the beak, working it through that, she's getting into condition. That's my routine, is that.
Okay. No, perfect. And then in terms of judging a cockbird condition, I'm going to assume on most of that's going to be volume.
Yes, you'll see it most, they'll start singing maybe, January, February, it'll start singing. But the actual breeding condition and singing is totally different just to the normal singing. They've got to be dancing up and down with the perch, singing its head off with the wings down by the side, and really, really going strong at it like that. That's how you want them, like that.
Brilliant. And then, so you've paired the birds up, let's say, and they're now a compatible pair.
Yes.
So when do you introduce the nest pans, and what style of nest pans do you use?
Usually, once I pull the slide and they're compatible, there's no fighting, I'll give them 5 to 7 days on their own like that, and then I would introduce this. This is what I use. It's a design I come up with, which would go into the cage like so. and then you just put your nest pan on that. You wouldn't have that perching. You'd put your nest pan in there, like so, and that would be the nest pan.
Perfect. And I know you also have some, let's call them freestanding nests as well.
Yeah. I've got the, you know, it's another design I did, which would go in there. Usually you end up putting it in between the perches like that.
Yeah.
Like that, but you can move that round the cage wherever you want it. The idea when I designed that was for, you know, when the young are in the nest, all the muck goes into the floor, not up back of the plastic cages, because that's what you know, the plastic's there. You don't want to be putting screws in the back or anything like that, because it just wipes so easy.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's my method.
Of course, and it, like you say, it protects your cage, so you're not having to damage your cage with screws. Yeah. It's a lot more cleaner because you're cleaning the floor, not having to disinfect the whole cage walls every single time a chick poos.
That's right.
So, okay, that makes absolutely perfect sense. Is there anything else from a breeding perspective? You know, do you leave the eggs in with the parent birds all the time? Do you remove them? What's your preference?
Yeah, I start out well in the season, meaning well and everything, so I would start, you know, each day an egg's laid. I would put it into me egg container on the side there and log it down and stuff. But sometimes, you know, you get busier and busier. Sometimes the eggs are left in. I don't think, to me personally, it doesn't make that much difference to them being taken out or left in. The birds still, they say, you know, they all hatch out together and they rear together. I think the birds know themselves how to carry on with them, whether there's, you know, one hatches one day and one, they all catch up the same to me. So.
Perfect. And are Gloster Canaries particularly good parent birds? Are they quite reliable in rearing their chicks?
Oh yes, they're good feeders. They rear their chicks. What you've got to be ready for is they'll want to go. The hen will want to start nesting again. Possibly, I usually put another nest ball in at 14 to 16 days old, so she can start building again. So they are, you know, really you don't want them pulling the tails on the young chicks, because that ruins the bird for showing. Then you see, so
of course,
if you get that nest ball in early, then you're all right. It cuts out the chance.
And you alluded to it there about the showing side of things. With your chicks, do you close ring the chicks? Do you put split rings on them?
I set out to close ring them, but sometimes you end up having to put split rings on if I've missed, because you'll look at a nest and you'll think, oh yeah, that's I'll do them tomorrow. Then tomorrow comes, you're too late. You know. Of course.
No, absolutely. I think we're all guilty of that.
Yeah. So it goes. Then they'll get a split ring on. Luckily, in this country, you can show them with split rings. In Europe, you can't. They've all got to be closed rung. So.
Okay, so it does depend on where you're showing as well.
Yes. That's right. Yeah. Right. This is me preparing a cock bird for breeding, and I usually trim the crest and the vent and the claws. So basically, we're looking careful that you not damage the eye or anything. Just that's sufficient so they can see the chicks and the crest doesn't get clogged up when they're feeding the chicks. I'll just turn it over and do the vent. And you've got to be careful with your old birds not to turn them over too quick, because just flipping them over really quick can kill them. So you've got your guide feathers. Your guide feathers are the ones there, so you're just snipping round your guide feathers. And basically, you're just trying to leave them guide feathers on, get rid of that little bit of muck. And there, you can see the guide feathers just in there. That's sufficient, is that? And then you would do the claws. And careful that you don't go into the red vein. And that's all your preparation for for that, like that, and that's the breeding cock. That's done, and I would do that with cocks and hens.
With trimming the bird down here for breeding, do you ever bother trimming the tail feathers? We've seen some varieties is common, some maybe not.
Yeah, some it's debatable. Some say it makes the birds stronger, a shorter tail makes them stronger. So basically you would just go something across like that, and that would be sufficient if you want to do that. Me personally, I do sometimes, other times I don't. I don't think it makes a real big difference to me, but sometimes it just makes a bird stronger.
Yeah.
You know, it allows them to get round the hen better. But that's basically the cock bird prepared for breeding now.
So we want to look at now pairing the birds.
Yep.
How do you choose what cock should go with what hen? I think it's first important that we start off with what do you pair together? Do you pair consort to consort, corona to corona, corona to consort? What's your preference?
Well, my preference is, well, you've got to pair a corona to a consort, whether it's cock or hen is a corona. It makes no big difference. But you don't want to be pairing consort to consort or corona to corona. You get all sorts of faults from that. But I've picked this is going to be my favourite pairing for this year. It's a lovely, the two nice small birds, as I think how they should be. It's the cock bird's got a beautiful crest. The hen she's a blue. This is one I bought in from Holland, from a good breeder across in Holland, and it's going to be me sort of outcross for this year, and I think they should produce really nice birds. They're both good short birds. They've both got the right shape, the right size, which should really produce nice birds. The blue hen, she's got a lovely head. That crest, I can see that crest already fitting over that head, and both got good wing carriage, good feather. I'm expecting and hoping really good youngsters from that pairing.
Amazing. So something we spoke about off camera was not doubling up on faults.
Yes.
What do you look at here that would complement each other, and then other things that you might go, that bird's maybe got a wing that drops too short, so we don't want to double up on that? What are you looking at here?
Well, both really, when I look at these two, there isn't really, as I would look at them, there isn't really a fault with these two.
Yeah.
I think they're both very nice birds. But say if the cock bird dropped a wing a little bit, the hen bird would have to have perfect wing carriage. If the hen bird was sort of nipped at back of the head a little bit, goes round and nipped what we class in terms as nipped at the back of the head, the cock bird has to have a full back skull to straighten that out.
Yeah.
She's got to have a good rise above the beak for the crest to go over. If you put a small headed consort to a small crested bird, all you're going to get is small crest from them. I like to go the opposite way around, where if you've got a short crested bird, then you would put a big headed consort to it to bring that crest out more. You know, ideally you want them, if you can work it so it fits like a glove.
Yeah.
That's basically it. And when you're looking at them from a pairing up point of view, I look at it that you have an undercoat and a gloss. That's what, from years ago, there was an old friend of mine said, good undercoat, good gloss, that's what you need. Don't put two glosses together. Two good feather quality birds together don't necessarily make a good bird, because the feather's different, you're slimming your birds down more. Whereas you have a sort of a dullish buff and a bright buff, they'll go together. Yeah, and usually in the pairing, when I'm handling the birds, one of them must carry what I class as a fat gene. And you must feel the fat on it, not just a ball of feathers. It's got to have that fat gene, at least one of them in the pairing. If both of them's got it, then that's ideal, but one of them must have it, and you can feel it, and you know, you should be okay then.
And that's feeling that muscle tone underneath the wings of the bird.
Yes, yeah, that's just feeling. It's generally the shape of the bird, and you can tell it's the same frame as the other bird, but one's carrying the fat gene, and it's got the bulk to it.
Yeah.
So I would expect that coming out in the youngsters. So many of the youngsters will still carry that, whereas I've had it before, 2 birds just all feather, and that's all you get is all feather again, not the shape you're after. Right, so looking from top of the head, you'll see the hen bird is lovely and round from when you're looking at the front. If you had to falter, when she comes to the back, she just nips in a little bit. Not a lot, but that's not necessarily that bad a fault. It's just that the cock bird hasn't got to have any of that on it, and if you look at the cock bird, it's full, it's broad, it's got, you know, a really broad back skull, and it's full, so that complements that bird. And he's got the length of crest, and he's also, when you feel him, you can feel his fat is carrying that body, so that makes, for me, that makes that a very good pairing. She shouldn't come, or the baby shouldn't come out with that head. They should all come out like the cock bird.
And then you'd be the opposite way round.
Yes.
Consort being a big head.
Yes. Yeah. You see, when you look at it, when you look at it from down there, she's probably just nipped a bit on back of the skull, but he's the opposite. So he's got a full back skull.
It's a case of getting that balance right.
Yes.
Then. You can't go too extremes.
No, not doubling what our class is, not doubling up on the faults, because you're doubling up. You're putting a fault there that'll be there all the time if you don't try and change it. But you can feel it. He carries the fat gene in it.
Yeah.
And also when there was in the show cage, the measurement was right on the length. Everything, they both complement each other. Perfect pairing for me.
So, let's say you've had a successful breeding season, you've got some fantastic young birds, and you're now interested in getting them on the show bench. So, could you just give us some tips? What's your show bench preparation looking like for the birds that you're going to show throughout the year?
Well, one of the main thing is handling the birds. Is if they are really nice, I'll select maybe 20 birds that are what I think are good enough for showing, and I'll go in and I'll handle them every single day. So basically, I'm not chasing them around the cage to try and catch them. I can just put my hand in, pick them up, just massage the feathers a little bit, their crest or their head like that, put them back in, and they get used to that. And I think that's a good thing for out on the show bench. They're used to people being right close up. And another thing is, mainly I get all my show birds at eye level, so they're being looked at every single day, and that's all part and parcel. Instead of having a bird so far 4 cages down and one up at the top, they're all at eye level. They all get looked at. They're used to being face right close up to them, which is like a judge would be. Then basically they get sprayed every day, with if I can, rainwater out, soft rainwater out the barrel. I'll spray them with that, and then closer to them finishing off, I'll add a slightest little bit of glycerine and rose water into it, and that helps put that little sheen on them. Also with their legs will get rubbed down with the glycerine and rose water, just like a woman does her face and everything. They get the legs done like that, and that's my preparation as well. Once they've been weaned off and they're coming through the mould, I give them as much food as they want to eat. Normally I start them off on, by the time they're weaned off, they're getting more of a dry mixture. When they're molting and coming through their molt, they'll get a dry mixture of egg food, conditioning seed, and one of the main thing is pinhead groats.
Yeah.
That's and you'll see when they're feeding really well, because everything they eat is the pinheads, and that's a fatty food that puts a good shape on them. If your birds tend to think, oh, they're too fat, because you can pile that weight on them. If you're thinking, oh, well, they're getting too fat, because you'll see that they're getting too fat is because you can't put anything on the head, so the head stays the same. So if they're what I class as pyramid shape,
Yes.
that the body will be really good and good shape, and it'll go up to nothing at the head. So that's your birds are too fat then. But it's easier to take the weight off the bird than it is to put it on. So you can put them on a plain canary seed for a week, and that'll run off straight away. So that's you've got to see the balance in the bird, that if they're getting too fat, then you cut back on it. A bit of plain canary seed will soon sort that out like that.
Wonderful. So when you're obviously the birds have got to be prepared for a show and let's say familiar with what it's going to be like. Is that the idea behind housing them in single cages like this, and then do you show cage train them at the same time?
Yes, yeah, they're going to the better ones going to single cages. They don't get plucked, they don't get their tails pulled out, and it settles them down at the same time of being in a cage.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, they're not in a small cage, they know where the perches are. If you take them out of a big cage, they're trying to hop from one perch to another, which might be 18 inches apart. Whereas the show cage is, you know, you're looking at 3 inches apart, and that's, you want them nice and steady. So that's, you know, that's how I look at them. And yeah, I'll hang a show cage on, or I'll put the bird in a show cage, walk about the shed for a little bit, and then pick it up, put it down again, and then 2 minutes later pick it up again and move it again like that. You know, it varies. Some people put a different coat on, a different coloured coat on to settle the birds down, to get them used to all different things.
Yeah.
I normally have the radio going, so they're used to different voices and everything, something going on in the background. All that to me is helping your birds relax and be themselves. Right, so these are the main colours what I keep. There is other new colours have come into it, but I don't have any of them at the moment. This is a nice cinnamon Corona hen at the front here. It did a little bit of winning for me this year. It's a sex-linked is cinnamon. It's you know, you breed off a cinnamon hen, you get young carrying cock birds. If you pair cinnamon to cinnamon, you'll get full cinnamons, cocks and hens. And then this is a blue variegated, well, they call them blue, but basically it's a white really. It's variegated white. It's a young cock bird, a good shape, a nice bird. You would get buffs off that, you would get greens, you would get whites off it. And we'll come on to this bird. It's a lightly variegated bird. You know, it's just a pretty colour. Normally I would go a little bit darker than that really, but pairing up, I would pair that to a dark crested cockbird, green crested cockbird, and you would expect then variegated birds from it. This is a young green hen. She did very well for me winning this year. Won a very big show, did that one. It's beautiful shape, but your greens are your backbone of your stud of birds. If you want to get on well, you've got to have greens, not just pretty colours. The greens are the backbone of the stud. You've got a grizzle up here. They're harder to breed of them. You can make what I class as a man-made grizzle, which is a clear bird to a dark crested bird. Normally you can get a grizzle out of them, but it'll just be a buff crested bird. It won't have the grey flecking in. When you've got the gene in your stud for grizzles, you'll have the grey flecking in the crest. That's a natural, normal grizzle, is that. And then we've got the fawn here, which is a white crossed with a cinnamon. That's what you can potentially get from your cinnamon and white pairings, which there's getting a lot more of those, of big classes now. And when you get one of these, and normally it's a very good attractive bird. So, but overall, you need your dark beds to put the substance into them to keep your bulk there, your shape there. Then once you've got those nice, then you can venture onto the particular colours that you want to breed. But if you just want to breed pretty colours, then it's your whites and your cinnamons, but they don't always make the right show bed.
And with your mutations, so in particular the cinnamons, are they something that you have to make sure you keep putting the greens into them to keep the size and the type, or are they something you keep separate?
No, nowadays is the cinnamons are that good nowadays. You can breed cinnamon to cinnamon and it doesn't change anything. Nowadays they're as good as any of your buff beds and your green beds. They've come a long way, because when I first started, for my first 10, 15 years, it was stay away from cinnamons, they ruin your stud of beds. Now everybody's using them, they've got to be really good shape. Cinnamons are winning shows now, so they're a good bird. I get a lot of people getting, confused with yellows. The class sometimes class these as yellows, but really the buffs, they're just clear buffs. That bird there is a yellow. That's a yellow feather. Now it looks dull and plain, but that's a yellow feather. When we go back to these, you don't really want to be pairing. You could pair them together one year, but you don't want to be pairing sort of the same coloured birds again, because you end up then the feather goes too soft and you end up with feather lumps. If they bruise themselves, the feathers aren't strong enough to push through the skin, they grow inside, which forms your lumps, or you're better known as feather cysts. So you use the yellows to put the better colour in. You see, that's a nice coloured, what I would class as clear. That's a nice coloured bird. But if you did it the same pairing again, you wash that colour out of it. That's washed out a little bit on that one. So you really you would either keep yellows or keep whites and cinnamons to put your feather quality in. You wouldn't do that pairing that often, although there is classes now for these birds, so I use them just to try and produce a show bird for that class, that's all.
Right. So that's obviously a no-go in terms of continually double buffing.
Yes.
Is it the similar situation with any of the colours? Is there anything that is a no-go?
Well, me personally, I wouldn't do white to white. Now, well, some people say it can be done, but there is the lethal gene in it where you can get full eggs and you can rear the chicks up to about 8 weeks, and then just after 8 weeks they'll slowly die off. There's that, but I wouldn't do blue to blue. It's I don't know what there is to gain from it.
Of course.
It's for me there's nothing to gain out of it really. I do believe in the blues you still get you call the buff blue, and you'll get the intensive blue. There is a difference in feather, but I still haven't tried pairing them together. I can't see any gain in it at all.
Of course. And is it a similar situation with crests? I know a lot of people say you should never be too crested.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me that's a complete no-no, because there's no point. I have seen people try it, and I've seen the results, and you get the centre of the crest, different places on the head, which is no good.
That brings us to the end of what has been a fantastic day here at David Rand's Bird Room. Thank you for having us, first off.
Quite all right.
So, Tim, I'd like to start with you. As a newcomer to the Gloster Canaries, what advice can you give somebody who's coming in to say, I've done this and this has been extremely helpful, and any further comments?
Well, I think if you're really passionate about anything, you need to surround yourself with the right people and the right things, and these two guys here have been instrumental in me setting back up, and hopefully next season be my first breeding season, and I should produce some decent stuff on the show bench. But that's down with surround myself with Mitch, Dave, the local guys where I'm at, and it's vital that you've got to circle with them people, because them people will help you, and that's what I've found, that generally people who care will help, and yeah, basically, yeah.
Oh, well, wonderful. And then Mitch, you know, a big thank you for organising this today, because you've got, you know, an ever-growing following on social media around Gloster Canary. So what was the idea behind having this meeting today, putting this episode together to help with the Glosters?
Well, I get that much people asking me how to pair up, and I've only been doing it a few years, and I've always said I'm no expert. So the only person I think of is like bring us all together, get up Dave's place, who's been doing it 40 odd years, and let him, the only way to do it is explain on camera, and that way is better than, and to try grow the Gloster Canary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's
Of course, absolutely. People need this sort of guidance going forward to succeed with well, not only Glosters but many different breeds. They need that expert guidance.
Oh.
You're absolutely spot on.
Anybody isn't lucky as me. I was surrounded by. I seem to get in with some good people straight away, and then you know got some good birds, and you've got to surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah.
If you surround yourself with the right people, you'll get half decent birds off, and you'll start breeding. If you don't, you're not going to. But it's all about the right people, really.
Yeah, it's having that strong foundation of where you're starting from. And then finally, Dave, well, thank you for having us all here.
Thank you for coming.
Wonderful and absolutely amazing sandwiches and cakes, and you know, I'm sure we've all very much enjoyed those. Any sort of closing remarks, anything that you would like to say to the newcomers to the hobby?
Yeah, to the newcomers in the hobby, remember you've got to learn how to lose as well as win, because it's no good being a bad loser, because if you're a bad loser you're not going to get anywhere. You've got to accept what the judges say, you've got to listen to the champions, to what they say, and take the experience on board, and you should get on.
Starting with Gloster Canaries doesn't have to be overwhelming, but it does reward patience, consistency and learning from experience. If you've enjoyed this episode today, please leave your questions in the comments and let us know what you'd like to see next, as we'll have plenty more like this in the future. From Oliver at OC Avery, thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next one.
I'm hoping flighty now is a bit better.